What's up, everyone? I'm super excited to have our very own Steve Shu on the podcast. And Steve, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. I just had a newborn a couple months ago, and GitLab's been amazing in terms of supporting me through the paternity leave and being back. And yeah, I've been doing really well. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so I really appreciate you taking the time to meet with me today. And really what we're trying to do over here is I want to hear your story because I actually think that your story is really, really, really interesting. Um, and to help out our audience here in terms of their career progression, right? So just a little bit about background on Steve. Steve is like a consummate sales professional. He's been in the outside doing enterprise sales, inside sales right now in our commercial space. Let's actually talk about some of your brag sheets right now. Like, talk to me about how you're doing this quarter and like some of the other metrics that you have.
Sure. In sales, we always talk about our quota and things like that. So this quarter, I'm getting close to 200%. Last quarter, I was at 187%. So it's been a good year so far for me. And due to COVID, there's a lot of uncertainty, but overall, I'd say, GitLab as a whole, we're doing really well, and I'm part of the team doing really well. And I'd say actually, wise outside of sales, I've been part of this program at GitLab called Minors in Tech, where we do a kind of like a give back project for the company. And I've been working with product management a lot. One of my mentors, Jackie Meschel, and we would essentially showcase a really cool project I'm working on. And for me, I wanted to be a little more cross-functional. And so I've been working on the side with the project for helping product and sales kind of be more collaborative with our cycles.
That's really cool. I'd love to, just for our audience here, I'd love to hear a little bit about your story. So, can you talk to me to like when you started thinking about a career in sales and walk me through that entire process? And also walk me through a little bit about your career, right? So,
Yeah.
did you start out in inside sales? And just let me know about let me hear about your story and what you're thinking at each of these stages.
Yeah, definitely, Chris. So, I'm Asian, and I think most people who've read Tiger Mom and all those other books are just about the Asian culture. It's you're kind of groomed to be a doctor, a lawyer. That's kind of the kind of what you're predestined to be, right? And so for me, going to college, I went to Cornell, and I started off as pre-med, going that same track that everyone was kind of grooming to be. And I think after my first year, I took some business classes and realized, these are actually more fun than a lot of pre-med classes. And so I started taking more business classes and changed my major maybe 5 times through the course of my college career. But I settled on undergrad business school at Cornell, and coming out of that, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Maybe banking, tech was probably the last thing on my list. But we had a career fair, and luckily for me, Oracle came to our career fair, and I stopped by the booth, and kind of the rest is history. That's how I ended up in tech sales. Oracle set a really nice foundation for me because they were at the time like one of the trailblazers in starting a college program, so helping new college hires transition out of school into the real world and having a technology sales type of program and training program that was very formal. And it was really, I'd say, critical for me to just gain that foundation of technology, of sales in general, because I'm pretty much never done sales before going to Oracle. And from there, I was able to kind of get my foot in the tech industry. I've been at a few startups since then. And, I'd say landing as GitLab was definitely one of the highlights because it's just great to be at a company doing tech sales at a company with a great product, great culture, and also great leadership to support you.
Yeah. Were your parents upset when you told them that you wanted to enter sales? Because it sounds like they wanted you to be a doctor, right?
Yeah, that's kind of it's like almost like you have 2 paths, right? But good news is my parents really did let me kind of do what I wanted to do. And it was really nice because even when I was before going to college, I'd work as like one of those like sales associates, like cash register guys at like a Toys R Us, which is not bankrupt. But I would do these types of jobs, so I had maybe some type of social experience outside of just going to hospital and volunteering and becoming a
Yeah, I
doctor.
did that too, actually. Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. And and even in college, I forgot to mention this, but I did some uh did some waiting on the side. So I was at a sushi restaurant in a college town. And there's a lot of things I did, I guess, that helped overall. And those are typical things that most maybe Asian people who are brought up from the Asian culture may not necessarily do, right? Because it's kind of like, well, you're either studying or you're maybe reading up on banking, or just trying to get A's or studying for the MCAT, LSAT. But I kind of did those other things during college, and I think that it all helps, right? Because it's all about gaining those experiences that you can't really have in college or in classes. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that was really cool. And my parents, they're just kind of like, oh, that's pretty cool. And they didn't really think too much about it. They just wanted to make sure that, one, I was making money at least, and I was able to support myself. And that's what mattered
Yeah.
to me.
I remember one time I tried to change my college major, and then my dad said that like you can't do that. That's not like, and to accept. I'm not gonna pay for your college if like you study this
Yeah.
like
Did you
major.
did you change your major multiple times like me, or?
I changed my major I think 3 or 4 times, and then I
Yeah,
ended
there we
up
go.
doing what my brother did.
Okay.
My brother was a super successful like investment banker on
Nice.
like New York City. So wanted to follow in his footsteps, and then so that's basically what I studied in college. And yeah, that's really cool. Like, did you like sales from the beginning, or was it just sort of like one of those things where it's like did you know that it was that you were going to make a career on it early on? You could tell that it
I
was a good fit for your personality.
I'll be honest. When you first start off in sales, if you're not in the ideal position, it's going to be hard, right? Um, so I think being in a training program with a lot of college hires at Oracle, it definitely helped because we're all in the same situation. We all had the same level of experience essentially, and professionally. Um, but it was definitely tough. Just not really having like an internship, right, in tech sales, or kind of living in the Bay Area and really knowing anyone in the tech industry. Um, so I definitely didn't think that I'd be in sales this long, but I know, over time, I did realize that it was really the best path for myself, just based on
Mm,
the skills I can still acquire, because I knew there was so much more I can learn, even after year one, year two, year three of being in sales, and even now, right? I'm still learning so much every day, and so there's always something new to learn, which has been amazing. One of my favorite parts about being in sales, especially in technology, because things are changing so fast all the time in the industry. And um, yeah, I mean, I'd say I really like where I am at right now. But I think if you asked me that, 6 years ago, or even 7 years ago when at Oracle, I probably wouldn't have given you the more confident answer that, yeah, this is the best path for me.
yeah. So walk me through a little bit of your career. So like, I'm on your LinkedIn now. It looks like you started out in market development, right? With Oracle.
Yeah, yeah. So how about I start off with how a typical sales progression works, right? So you typically start off at SDR, and maybe most people who are listening to this podcast, they're SDRs, and you kind of prove your worth, and eventually you move on to either a closing role that's inside, outside, or maybe go a different path, right, in sales. But the natural progression is you go from SDR to like a SMB rep and a mid-market rep, and then ultimately enterprise. Yeah, so we were fortunate at Oracle where we were kind of able to go into closing role right away. So after 6 months of training, we were kind of put into kind of account manager position. Six accounts, large accounts, Fortune 500 accounts that you manage and try to upsell. Um, so that was, for me, that was my first sales experience. It's actually not necessarily finding new business, but just you're talking to these 6 companies that already have really great relationships that we wanted to continue to grow. So that definitely helped the transition from not really having too much sales to at least not having to go through the really tough grind of finding new business every single day. But at the same time, on the flip side, I didn't have that experience of doing that, right? So when I left Oracle, and going to Zora, which was a startup, my very first startup, I was actually able to, one, get that experience, because at a startup, you don't have, 6 accounts they manage. You typically have a whole territory, a geographical territory. And I was able to um, essentially gain that experience of, one, grinding it out every day, finding leads, helping field reps close deals and discover opportunities in large accounts. So I thought that was a really great turning point in my career in terms of understanding how sales actually works. It's not just selling to 6 different accounts, but you're trying to bring value to every single prospect you talk to. And so
Yeah.
it was the natural progression, but I was still able to get that experience from there. And then from there, I've been closing since.
When did you move to enterprise sales?
So I was in enterprise sales at Darktrace. So it was a startup that did things it was very unconventional. And so they hired a lot of kids from, I hate to say, but they hired a lot of kids from like the Ivy League schools, like the schools that are well known. And they basically trusted us to go after large enterprise accounts. And so that's typically not standard in industry. Typically with large accounts, you have to have, and rightfully so, you have to have years of experience. And you're typically a seasoned vet by then, and you're going after large accounts. So we were fortunate where we were able to kind of have the leadership there to just let us go after these really large accounts. So for me, that was probably the biggest experiences I've got, because it was a really awesome field experience. We were always traveling. We had to go to events, to run booths. Really had to build all these relationships with these large accounts, right? And even if
Yeah.
you do have one contact, in the tech industry, people do move around a lot. And so if you have that one contact, you always have to learn not to ever burn the bridge, right? Because they could be at another larger customer and you can get the business there. But there was a whole bunch of learning experiences in that role with Darktrace. So I didn't do as well there as, obviously I'm doing it at GitLab, but I learned a ton just about building relationships and, selling into large organizations. That really helped me, even with the current role I'm in.
Yeah, I remember when I was doing inside sales and just getting my first in-person meetings and moving into more of a hybrid role. Like,
It's
yeah,
different.
I just remember, yeah, it's definitely different. And I remember the people that I was with, they were more green, and some of these people would be like really nervous, and you could tell. Like, and it's just trying to navigate through like the emotions of all of that, because you need to exude confidence and you need to like deliver like value ultimately, right? And so
Yeah.
just trying to do the emotional management as well as just the entire sales conversation.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah.
That's the biggest part. You're right on, Chris. Like with the large accounts, it's you're building, because these sales cycles are long, right? So you're constantly building a relationship. You're constantly going through negotiations, even from the very first meeting through the year. And so
Yeah.
every meeting counts. And if you're not confident in one meeting, it could hurt you later on in the sales cycle.
I think thanks for sharing that. um I'd love to hear more about like your experience in inside and outside sales. So it's like, from someone who's thinking about getting into both of these tracks, one of the things that we're very fortunate to have is that you've done both, right? So it's just sort of like, some of the people in the SDR organization, they're on a lot of these calls, but they may not know the rest of all that stuff that happens behind the scenes and the rest of the deal cycle, right? So can you tell me more about the day-to-day of like what happens in inside sales, and then how that changes when you get into outside sales? Walk me through like what your day-to-day looks like.
Yeah, sure. So when we're talking about inside sales, we're talking about like being an SDR, right, Chris?
I'm talking about like SMB role here, or something like
Sure.
its
Yeah.
equivalent.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I was thinking back, I think the biggest part about like inside sales, like, just you're doing a lot of transactions. It's, you really have to grind it out. You have to go after every little deal, right? And you really have to maximize your time, because every transaction could add up to your number. So it's really a numbers game in the end for inside sales. It's, however many however much activity you're doing, and we track that here at GitLab. It's, we call it the required 7, but it's you're not only doing calls, you're not only going after customers, but you're also making sure that you're doing all the right things through each deal, and you're very, very organized, and you have almost like a strict process that you're following. So you do X amount of calls, or you you reach out to X amount of customers, you're bound to get X amount of pipeline, and that pipeline should theoretically convert to this much revenue closed to retire in your quota. So it's a very process-driven job, I believe,
Mm,
inside sales. Whereas with outside, sometimes your year could just bank on one big deal, right? Or it could bank on a couple or 3 big deals. So it's a lot less predictable, and it's a lot more. It fluctuates a lot more, and so you really have to trust your own. You have to trust your own confidence. You also have to trust your just ability, right? You have to be confident in yourself, because you could have a whole year, 11 months into the year, where you haven't closed one deal, but then on the very last day of the month or the quarter, you bring a huge one in, and you make your number.
yeah. I've never had like global accounts or national accounts like that. That's crazy. I can't imagine that.
Yeah, it's not for everyone, and so a lot of people, some people maybe don't want to go into large sales, sometimes, and it really depends on sometimes maybe the point in your life, right? Do you want more stability, and also just how confident are you in yourself, right? You're basically betting on yourself, for either roles.
Yeah, like you are the product. That's a really interesting perspective. How I I'm trying to phrase this the right way. So when you were doing, is it common for like these like long sales cycles, like $10 million is riding on this one deal, and it keeps on going back and forth to like these one or two decision makers that are like arguing or something like that? I imagine that it's probably really easy to get like super nervous. Is that common among people who are working out in the field?
I mean, I'd say so. I was definitely nervous whenever I had a large deal, and I think, um, everyone has the right to be nervous when it's, because one, it's not just you who's got skin in the game, but most likely you're going to have management eyes on it, and not just your
Yeah,
manager, but his manager, the VP, and probably all the way up to CRO. And
yeah,
so with large deals, and I'd say most of my career's technically been in commercial and market sales. I only had that 1 year and a half in large enterprise, but during that 1 year and a half, I did learn that with large deals, um, it's really a team effort. Like, you have to have multiple stakeholders involved on the customer side, but also on your company side, right? So it's not just going to be you selling to the customer. It's going to be your solution architect, your engineer, which you were once for, Chris. So I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. But not just you, right? Sometimes you have product involved, because the large customers always demand something more. And when it's a larger contract, I'm sure it's not just going to be product, but sometimes you may have to loop in legal, right, a lot more times to get through contracting, because there's never going to be a standard term. And outside of that, you might get involvement from other stakeholders. Sometimes I've had a deal once with a larger customer where you have the board that they somehow know each other, and so you sometimes get the board involved. You pull all these different strings that you can to bring home this one huge deal, but it's not just going to be you. It's going to be everyone.
yeah. That's actually really interesting because like from my perspective, I used to be one of those people that was on that team, right? So you would loop me in and say, "Hey, we're flying out to like San Francisco or something like that." Um, I think that that's really interesting. So it's just sort of like there's this team, right? So you have the SA, you might have like an SSA, you might need to get like your chief architect on. If it's like a really, really, really important deal, you might have to get like directors and like maybe I remember my mentor at Red Hat, the VP would like get on some of these calls just because like they wanted to show that the customer was important,
Right.
basically, right? Um, that's actually really interesting. Do you feel like part of that is like managing, like, did you feel like you were the quarterback that was managing all these people around, um, and like, organizing this team?
Yeah, it's a great term. It's an analogy. It's like you're the quarterback. Some other terms I've heard from training way back really great trainers, sales trainers, is like you're kind of like the conductor of a symphony, right? Because
Oh,
you're, and I used to play the violin, so it resonated with me more a little on that front. I was a violin player, and then I did swimming, but I never really played in like football or basketball or like organized or professional level. But like for a conductor, you're kind of just, do we use the violinist here? Sometimes the cellist will come in, and you have the bassist in the back, but everyone contributes to that synergy, that that masterpiece, right? And that
yeah,
performance. And so it's almost like yeah, it's kind of like you're performing, you're the conductor, and you're trying to make sure everyone's all in sync together, much like what a quarterback does.
yeah. All right. Thanks for walking me through that. Um, yeah, so we just talked about the life in inside and outside sales. That was actually, I learned a ton from what you just shared, because like I've always been on the other side of the fence. Um, let's talk about leveling up and rites of passage. So I guess what I mean by this is like there's like this path, right? So it's like SDR, and then I learn skills X, Y, and Z. I'm hitting quota consistently. I get moved up to SMB. Now I learn A, B, and C skills, and now I move up, and then I'm in some sort of hybrid role for a lot of places, and then finally it's just sort of like I get the big accounts, and I get to work on like these very strategic deals that may take like a year to a year and a half to close. I'm really curious as to learning about from your perspective, because like from the SA perspective, honestly speaking, it's like one, do they have the people skills, and two, do they understand the technology? So it's a lot more linear. Um, but like I'm really interested in hearing about like the rites of passage and the skills that are needed to go from one to the next. And so that's one part of the question. And the other part of the question is like, so I'm curious as to like how someone could be proactive in figuring this stuff out, right? So it's just sort of like sales blogs, books, mentors, and to a certain extent, like there is absolutely nothing that could prepare me for field sales. Like there's just, I don't think that like the difference between inside and outside, it was just so drastic for me that yeah, it would have had to have been some other like customer facing role that like just was in a different, just like outside of sales to really prepare you for something like that. But yeah, I'd love to hear about like how to level up from one to the next, and like the different skills that are really needed from one to the one role to the next role.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for skills, the biggest skill, like you're saying, Chris, it's being comfortable, like being comfortable being uncomfortable. I don't know how to say it any other way, but it's like you're okay with being uncomfortable, and part of being uncomfortable is you're growing, right? And so you're okay, like you're gonna make some mistakes, and experience is always the best teacher. So you're okay, one, being confident if you make the mistake, and just continuing to grind, right? Because everyone in sales loses a deal here or there, that was most likely because of the rep themselves and not the other team members. um, so I think that's one skill. And honestly, in terms of the preparation, it's really just experience. Like I've always wondered why, when you get job descriptions, it's always you need X amount of years of experience or X amount of years in this industry. And I believe there's a reason to it, right? Because with software especially, you're typically selling to different key stakeholders. Like some companies you're selling just the CFO office, some companies you're selling just the IT, and some companies you could be selling HR software, right? And you're only typically talking to leaders in each respective division. um, it's and in some companies, you have a platform where you're going to have to talk to every single key stakeholder in the company. So I think part of it is just learning how you're selling to each buyer, an economic buyer. And also another skill is just building a champion. We talk about it a lot at GitLab and most places I worked with. It's if you can build a champion that can sell for you, and you enable them to sell for you, it makes your job a lot easier. And most of the time, the deal comes in. So if you have all those skills, and then you had just like a lot of it's just grit and grind. Part of sales is, it really is a numbers game. And remember my very early on career, I had a lot of mentors, and a lot of people always said it really is a numbers game, and it truly is. It's like how much effort you're putting in is most likely how much output you're going to get um, from your job and your responsibilities as a rep. And so
Hmm.
I'd say all of those put together could prepare you. And in terms of being proactive, I mean, those are the stuff that you just kind of have to experience. But if you could get mentors, that's probably something I wish I would have done more when I was younger, because I feel like if I had a mentor, really, like multiple mentors really telling me, hey, this is the best path for you, maybe this isn't the best decision, um,
Yeah.
maybe I would have been like a lot more successful earlier on, right? And I think that would have been key. And so now I've learned from that, and everywhere I went, I've tried to seek out mentors or join these mentorship programs that GitLab so kindly offers. That's like huge for sales, because it's like in sales, I think especially, you could get very much off track, and you can be pretty lonely sometimes if maybe you're not having a great year or a great quarter, right? And you're
Yeah.
starting to doubt yourself. And whenever that doubt comes in, that's when it gets really dangerous, because then it's like a hole that you really want to dig yourself out of. But when you have a
Yeah.
mentor that can pick you out of that, it really helps. And so that's a key.
Gotcha. I really like what you just said about emotional management. I remember even like before meetings, it's just like doing like deep breaths and stuff like that to just sort of like get like a level-headed, I got to get my emotions right, right? I appreciate you sharing that with me. Um, where I know that like well, I I won't go there. Yeah, let's actually have a little bit of like story time. I'm interested
Yeah,
in hearing about like like sales is just like one of those things where it's like there are so many good stories, right?
right.
I'll talk about one story first just to kick things off. But I'm really curious to hear about like one really, really big win that you've had in your career. And also just like, can you give me like just like a ridiculous story, like something that would be illustrative, however, of like you will have to deal with this. Like I was stuck in this airport at like 9 p.m. in Kansas or something like that, you know. I know I just
Yeah,
sprung this on you, so I'll do a quick story first, just for the audience. But
sure.
at my last year at Red Hat, I I was responsible for twice the number of AEs as regular essays were, and then so it was just like in a 1 year of like just grinding away, and just like lots and lots and lots of meetings all of the time, and I felt like we did a really great job. So we hit Q1, Q2, we missed Q3, and then Q4 ended up shaping up really, really well. And I thought I was going to hit for the year, and I had like a good amount of stuff in accelerators. The way that Red Hat accelerators work is that if you're over 100%, then you get 2x generally. It really depends, and I'm sort of like new. It's more complicated than that. But what ended up happening is that when everything was tallied, my quota for the year came out at
Oh,
99.9983%.
damn, that's the
And
worst.
literally like if anyone bought like the like one user seat of GitLab, like the smallest SKU that we have,
Yeah,
then
that's
like
frustrating.
it would have hit like a lot of accelerators just because of some of the strategic stuff that I was selling. But anyway, that's just part of like the game, right? And then so was I upset about it? Yeah, but I think that it's exactly what you said, where it was like it's a numbers game, right? And then so you will have years like that in your career. You also have really great quarters, right? You'll have quarters in which you hit mass accelerators, you get a whale, and those are the quarters that you got to save up for the other quarter in which like you might get a bad patch or something like that. Um, but yeah, I'm curious to hear some of like some of your stories. I always think that sales stories are so fun to hear.
Yeah, no, I agree. What's funny is when you think about sales stories, I always think about, most people I think about their like first big win.
Yeah.
And so that's like for me, it's like my first. It's always like the first one, and it was like when I was at Dual Security, they got bought by Cisco, but it was a great organization. And when I joined, I was the first account manager there. So before I joined, before my manager hired me, there was it was all AEs, right? So I was like the first account manager, and my sole purpose was to upsell customers with a new plan that they just released. And I remember there was this one company that just got bought by IBM. Um, and so that in itself was already a red flag. I was thinking, am I even allowed to work this one? So I got confirmation there, and it was technically SMB. So I started working on it, and found the champion there who, surprisingly, he was even though no one really contacted him, because a lot of the business we did there was sometimes self-service. He was very open to just chatting about some new things that we were releasing. And so I got on a call with Dale, he was like a director of information security, and he basically said, sounds great. Give me and my team a demo. And this before this, essays always gave demos, right? So I'm always used to having someone else on calls doing the demos, the typical enterprise sales type of cycle that you go through. But they already had a relationship with them, and he scheduled a meeting just the day after, and it was probably one of my first, like maybe one of my third deals there. Honestly, like it was very early on in my role there, and so I was like, yeah, let's do a demo. And so I ended up giving a demo to him, and I didn't realize how many people he brought on a team because Zoom wasn't that popular yet. And all I remember hearing was he goes, "All right, Steve, you've got I think a team of like 30 or 40. My guys here, it's all you." And so that was kind of my first demo presentation, but I was able to get through it. And I just remember, bringing a sigh of relief at the very end of the demo. I think it was about an hour long, and it was just everything was silent, right? And you don't know what they're thinking because it was a virtual demo too. I wasn't like on site
Yeah.
or anything because it's SMB, and Dale just goes, "All right, send me a quote," and I just thought, man, like it can't be that easy. So like long story short, I ended up sending him a quote, and obviously that's not the end, right? So he goes silent, and so I thought, I thought it did pretty well. Maybe I should just talk to him. And obviously I had my manager help me out through this whole process. But it turns out, when you get bought by another company, there's different processes, and so he was trying to help me get through those processes. I was calling him every day, and I think at a certain point it was like the very last day of the quarter. I remember it was like July 31st, and this was like a deal I was forecasting. So everyone's looking at it, and I just remember going, man, I don't think this is coming in. And my manager was helping me, call up. And I remember we were looking at LinkedIn and looking at IBM, and there's hundreds of thousands of people. And we're like, who do we contact to get this deal done? And finally, I remember just calling Dale and having it really comes down to just a human conversation, and just asking him, hey, who do I talk to sign this off? We don't need a PO. We don't need any of this stuff that IBM requires. Like all we need is just someone to sign this, indicating that you want this upgrade, right? And so it turns out it was this complete other guy in a different department that just happened to be able to sign this. And so I called the other guy who was traveling with his family, in San Francisco. So it was funny because at the time I was also in the Bay Area, so I was almost going to pull out the card, hey, why don't we just meet at a restaurant and get signed? But we didn't need to do that because he had DocuSign ready and everything. I just remember him picking up the phone, the VP, and he goes, "Who's this?" I'm like, "Oh, this is Steve. I'm working with one of your colleagues, Dale." And he goes, "Oh," he's like, "Yeah, I think I heard Dale told me like you're trying to get something signed." And I go, "Yeah." So I was like, "Steve, like we've got to get this signed by today, based on everything we've agreed upon." He goes, "Yeah, let me just open the DocuSign up." He's like, and also he's like, I just got off the plane, and I've got my kids here in this Uber with me, and he's like, "So just excuse the noise." And I go, "No, it's okay. Can you just make sure that everything looks good and you can sign off?" So he ended up signing off, that very last day of the month, and I just remember, I was like, wow, that's basically what it takes sometimes. Like things never go as planned, and sometimes you just have to be very human with who you're interacting with. And if you trust the relationship, they typically will guide you towards a solution to the problem that you're trying to solve as a rep.
Yeah. That story is so indicative of like, I just feel like the general sales experience. I loved hearing that story. What I guess like one, so I was never really involved in closing, right? I heard about it, but like that's not something that essays do. This is actually instructional for me. I don't know what the answer is to this, but like how often do, so it's like your customers know that you're a vendor. They know that you have a quarterly system. They know that the salespeople are incentivized for closing within the quarterly system. So I always imagined that that's part of the reason why all of like 50% of our business gets closed in the last week
Yeah,
sometimes is because they're trying to abuse that, right? They know that like they can get the maximum discount if they wait until the last
absolutely,
seconds. So like
absolutely.
I imagine it's pretty common, right?
Very
They
common.
probably look up.
It's yeah, it's so
Yeah.
funny you mentioned that. No, you just reminded me. I even mentioned this, but that deal I just talked about, my very first big quote unquote big deal. I'll never forget to the guy who signed the economic buyer, the guy who signed it. The first thing he said was, "Oh, it's the last day of the month." Okay, it's like they all know, like all the guys know about it. It's like not a secret. Anyone who's been in it long enough understands like how sales works and how quarter works, month end works, year end works. Um, the best lesson I learned at Oracle was, it was such a big company, and a lot of companies, they like pay procurement guys, right, hundreds, like a pretty good salary basically, to specifically negotiate directly with a vendor like Oracle, right? And so like some people's professions literally were built upon, um, how to take advantage of quarter ends, of yearly ends, month ends even, and how to understand how each vendor's contracting works. So yeah, it's pretty crazy world, but that's how it is. And you have to understand that game too.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's kind
Yeah.
of funny how like what typically what percentage of business closes on like the last week of the quarter? Like in my experience, it's generally around like maybe 40%.
Yeah, I think that's
It depends on the
that's pretty
business.
accurate. Yeah, I'm sure it was that like that at Red Hat.
Yeah, in my
Yeah,
group.
I remember. Yeah, even at Oracle it was like that. And maybe SaaS companies are a little different, but I anticipate those Q4s are always going to be the biggest. Rightfully so, it should typically be the biggest, because that's just when you want to close out the year. Sometimes when you're a public company, you're reporting your fiscal results. It could make or break your stock price. There's
Yeah,
a lot of factors that go into that Q4,
yeah.
that everyone wants to take advantage of.
I remember my mentor at Red Hat. That was one of the things that it was just sort of like it was such a large deal that it would manipulate stock price, and then so like the CEO got involved at a certain point in time because we were trying to get bought out by IBM. Eventually acquired Red Hat, right?
Right. Yeah.
um that sounds like a lot of pressure. It's like, hey, the CEO of this company wants to like schedule a one-on-one with you real quick.
Yeah.
um
That's crazy. And but that's why you get so many people involved, right? I think one of my colleagues, Sharif, like during our SKO, he was like saying on the stage, or I don't know if he said to me, but when you have a big deal, you get everyone involved, and let's say worst case scenario, it doesn't go as planned. At least you're not the only one, right? That was in it. You're not the only one with the skin in the
yeah,
game. It's like it was a whole team collaboration effort. Um, so
I
it's
really,
you are it's great to just have a team to back you up in case, um, sometimes things just don't go as planned.
yeah, I'd love to hear what the story was like when Microsoft was going against Amazon for the like $10 billion war cloud deal. Like
Oh my
that would have been
goodness,
like
I
it's
heard
just
about that.
like
Yeah, the Jedi deal,
uh,
right?
yeah, the Jedi deal. Like that is just sort of like if this deal closes, you don't have to work for the rest of your life. If it
Yeah,
doesn't, then I don't know, they're probably still fine, but like it's just like that large of a stage. I imagine it's almost like playing like in an NBA championship or
it
something like
really
that.
is. Yeah, and at that stage, it's not even about the dollar amount either. It's like it's like the brand too, right?
Yeah.
Because I think did Microsoft win that one? Yeah, Microsoft won, and then their stock price like go up, and it wasn't just because it was like billions of dollars, but it was the fact that this organization, I think it's the government organization, trusted this vendor to do this with this much money. So I'm assuming that when most companies see that, it builds a lot of credibility for Microsoft versus another vendor.
Yeah, cool. Um, I really want to hear your opinion on one last question. And then so it's just sort of like, I have a lot of friends in my personal life, and then they hear about technology sales and they're like, they see the, the pay ranges and everything like that. And then, well, I guess it's a two-part question. So I do apologize, but like
No, it's all good.
part one is that like, they're like, I could do that, right? And then I want to hear, like, as someone who has done inside sales, outside sales, been on these big stages before, I want to hear like your thoughts on like what do you, actually it really is the same question, but like, do you think that sales takes a certain personality to do, or do you think that it is a teachable skill? Well, it actually is a two-part question. And then the second thing is, what sort of people, like, let's just say that like you were a hiring manager, like you've been around all of these super successful salespeople, President's Club, you're around all these other people that made it to President's Club, right? Um, like I'm curious as to like whether or not there are similarities in terms of personality and style, or if like there's literally like, I was reading a book on management actually this weekend, and one of the things that it said is like there's this meta study of like super large leaders in the United States, so like Steve Jobs and like Bill Gates and all these other people. And what they found out is that there's almost no relationship in personality type, which is actually something that's really surprising, right?
Yeah, it's interesting.
Um, yeah, but the point that the author is just trying to make is that like if you do these like leadership X, Y, and Z, you can be a great leader. Doesn't matter so much your personality. Yeah, so the just sort of like summarize it. I'm curious as to if you think that sales is a teachable skill, or if at a certain extent does personality need to be there and you need the skills. And then the second part of the question was, I don't even remember what the second part of the question was. The second part of what I asked.
Yeah, no, I think you were saying like personality, and then also like, is it just personality or is it a skill, right? That's what it comes down to, or is it both?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
curious as to what you think about that.
yeah, it's an interesting question. Like I said, I never thought that I would be um, in tech sales, but this I think realizing over the years, um, it's a great fit, right, for me. And I think part of it is a teachable skill because again, I didn't really do like professional sales before this, so it's definitely teachable. Um, but I think at the same time, maybe some type of personality. Like a great example is, so I was raised by my grandparents in China, so I wasn't born here. Um, but I just remembered that I guess in a way innately I had some type of like sociability. So when I came to America, even though I had that language barrier, I was still able to kind of pick it back up just so I can communicate with everyone around me. And over time, I just realized I'm sort of introverted, but I'm also have extroverted qualities, right? But at the same time, it's not just personality. You also have to have that, the grit and the grind. They always say in sales, you watch like Wolf of Wall Street and all those like really crazy movies of sales guys. You really do have to like put in a lot of work and grind every day, and always have kind of like money has to be a primary motivating factor too. So if you're not in it to make money, sometimes maybe it's not the ideal track for you, because being in sales, everyone does tend to be in sales to try to overachieve, try to have the chance of hitting accelerators, going to President's Club, etc., and just having that pride of closing big deals and helping a company generate revenue. So all that does come down to that grind and kind of that mindset that you're trying to do as much work as possible. And it may not amount to much, it may not translate to a closed deal, but at least that you put into work, and you can be satisfied that you put enough work to at least give yourself a chance. So I think all of that coming together, it does help. A great example, like I have a younger sister, and she's very different from me, right? And so my family knows it. she's, you know, she's very, very, very introverted and very quiet. So, you know, her personality would be a very bad fit for sales, but maybe she's also really good at designing and very creative stuff. So that's why we have all these different types of jobs. So I think to sum it up, it's definitely a teachable skill, but you need some type of like, you know, salesy personality or some type of grit and grind in you to be successful and, you know, have that that drive every day to wake up in the morning and, you know, do the calls, talk to customers, like enjoy talking to customers, like genuinely enjoy like talking to customers and trying to solve their problems and translate that to revenue if you can solve their problems.
I think that that's really interesting what you just shared, because I feel like the misconception with sales is that like you got to be this like really friendly, cool person, you know, everything. But um, there are there are some super successful salespeople that are like kind of like quiet, you know. One of the most successful salespeople that I know, and person who like vast financial like achievement, is very introverted actually. So it just goes to, I really think that it's
Talk about your
interesting.
brother.
It's actually not my brother.
Okay.
My there's a lot of stories that I could share about my brother, but I think that that's really interesting that one of the things that you mentioned is like the grind. You know what I mean? And like that inner desire to achieve, and how that's actually something that may matter more than the social ability and all of the other stuff that is kind of a little bit like more superficial, right? I think that you need both. Um, but it's like the classic like pitcher story, right? So they draft like a
Yeah.
#1 pick for a pitcher, and then he's great in terms of all of his measurables and intangibles, but he can't take failure, and then so he's out of the league in like 2 years, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Agreed.
So yeah,
Yeah. The draft profile could only go so far, basically. Yeah, it's very true. I like that.
yeah. All right. Well, thanks for sharing your story, and I really think that a lot of people are gonna. This is going to be helpful for a lot of people that are thinking about moving into sales. Honestly, I learned a ton from your story, Steve.
Oh, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. Seriously, this is great. So fun.
Yeah.